Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Scotland basks in a heatwave and the mercury looks set to rise even further tomorrow.
It's been a hot summer's day right across the country. We've had the warmest day of the year so far, but how much longer can it last? Find out with a full forecast just before 7.
Also on the programme. This mother sues a holiday firm after claims her 5-year-old daughter was abducted from a hotel children's club in Turkey. 9 new faces in the Scottish Government as the First Minister completes her cabinet reshuffle. Andy Murray steps up his comeback. He's playing the current British #1 Kyle Edmund right now. We'll bring you the latest from Eastbourne. And in the 70th year of the NHS, we examine how Scotland helped forge the principles of the world's first free cradle-to-grave health service. Good evening. Scotland is basking in its warmest June day in more than 2 decades, and it's set to get even hotter. The highest temperature was recorded in Aviemore, with the mercury at 31 degrees Celsius. Our reporter Aileen Clark has been finding out how the country is coping.
The Ayrshire coast was the costa of choice for many families seeking a day full of Scottish sunshine. While there was much fun being had, a reminder from the Ardrossan Coast Guard to leave inflatables behind. They've had to rescue a number of adults and children already this summer who have drifted out to sea. As the temperatures rose this afternoon, those at Troon were happy enough staying on the sandy beach.
I'm loving it. We were in Portugal and it wasn't as hot as this 3 weeks ago. So I'm really enjoying it. My day off, got the grandchildren, quite happy.
Oh, it's brilliant. We're just back from holiday from Benidorm just 2 weeks ago, and it's really, really good. It's just really nearly about the same as Benidorm today.
Across Scotland, this was the hottest day for 5 years. Even the police horses on beach patrol had to be careful.
Both Cooper and Kilmarnock have their sunscreen on today on their noses, yes.
That does the job for horses too, does it?
Yes, exactly the same as humans, yes.
In Aberdeen, from mid-morning, the beach was the destination of choice, and the sun was well out by lunchtime in Shetland. But it's Aviemore where the record temperature hit 31 degrees, a real treat for those spending the day at Lochmorlich.
When you get the weather, I mean, look at the view. So why would you go abroad when you can drive an hour for us and then just come here?
But barbecue weather brings its own worries.
One of the things people don't understand is that they have no right to light an open fire in woodland or peatland, and that's a lot of this national park. And to be honest, at this time of year when it's this dry, they've not got a right to light fires at all. So we'd rather they chose a different way to eat at this time of year.
Concerns too for the rail network. Such strong sunshine means extra engineers are being drafted in to keep a check on the tracks.
Rails can be up to 20 degrees hotter than the air temperature around them. If rails get too hot, they can start to buckle and bend, which affects our ability to run a train service.
In Edinburgh, many people were taking that hint. Ice cream in the sunshine, the order of the day. The weather, a bonus for tourists.
We can't believe this weather. This is like a California sky, because we're from San Francisco.
We were not expecting this lovely weather, but the weather is amazing. We're not feeling cold at all. It's a little chilly, but that is the best thing.
And with the hot weather due to continue, in Troon, some were already planning their next stop on a beach tour.
Where we were yesterday.
Prestwick.
Prestwick. That's right, we're in Prestwick. Had to think there.
Troon today.
Troon today.
And where tomorrow, Leah?
Ayr. Yes, oh yes, laughing it up.
With the soaring temperatures, staff at accident and emergency departments around the country will be hoping there's been plenty of sunblock used today, or their waiting rooms tonight could be very full of very burnt sun worshippers. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Troon.
And we'll have a full weather forecast at the end of the programme. An Inverness mother who claims her 5-year-old daughter was abducted from a hotel kids club in Turkey is suing the holiday firm Thomas Cook. The child was found with a stranger in the large complex within half an hour. The company says it's concerned to hear about the incident, which it's investigating. Jackie O'Brien reports.
They may be home in the relative safety of their close-knit Inverness neighbourhood, but Janet Alexander can no longer cope with letting her 2 young children out alone.
Does it bother you now that I'm insisting on coming to the park with you?
No.
No?
She says she's been left traumatised since her 5-year-old daughter Rose disappeared from a supervised kids club in a Turkey hotel at Easter.
There was chaos as everybody realised she was missing and started running around, and people from around the pool started looking for her. And I was really quite frozen with fear.
We went searching for her. We couldn't find her, and eventually we found her though.
During the frantic search of the Royal Wings hotel complex in Antalya, Rose was found unharmed 20 minutes later in the company of a mystery foreign woman who, they believed, abducted her.
In my heart, I know that there was some sort of unpleasant motive behind this. I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds of metres away she'd taken her.
The female left the scene and the case wasn't pursued by the police. Janet is now suing her holiday operator Thomas Cook, who she claims failed to help the family.
I think it's terrible that they would leave a family abandoned in a foreign country and not make sure not only that we were okay, but the current users of the facilities were okay as well, because obviously I felt the other children that were using the club were then at risk.
I think they should be very keen to resolve this. Child abduction is really at the heart of the Scottish consciousness. Ever really since Madeleine McCann, this kind of situation inflames the what-ifs. This is a parent's worst nightmare.
In a statement, Thomas Cook says it's concerned to hear of the incident, which it's investigating thoroughly with the hotel. It says it'll work on making any required changes to ensure that it can't happen again. The Royal Wings Hotel, meanwhile, denies an abduction took place. Jackie O'Brien reporting Scotland, Inverness.
The First Minister has completed her cabinet reshuffle, appointing 9 people to the junior ministerial team. Nicola Sturgeon told the new recruits they had big jobs to do, but also advised them to enjoy the experience. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has this roundup of the new faces in government.
You've got big jobs to do, and I know you'll all work really hard.
The new junior team, perhaps slightly on edge, meets the First Minister at her official residence. 9 new people have been appointed. Earlier in the morning, the Highlands MSP Kate Forbes was one of the first at Bute House. She takes on the public finance brief. The former businessman, Ivan McKee, goes to trade, and Claire Hockey, a former mental health nurse, becomes Mental Health Minister.
Morning.
Angus MSP Marie Goujon goes off to Rural Affairs. The top tier of government was appointed yesterday. Nicola Sturgeon showed off her cabinet to the waiting media. Out went the Health Secretary and also the Economy Secretary. That role is being combined with Derek Mackay's finance brief.
I think it makes sense to bring finance together with the government's economic policy. It clearly, I want to align the economic policy to deliver on our economic growth agenda. So I'm actually very enthusiastic and excited by this wonderful opportunity.
It's been a significant change, and now the First Minister has put the finishing touches to her top team. So, exciting times ahead for the junior ministers meeting in Bute House just now as the reshuffle is complete. But politics can be a cruel business. Perhaps spare a thought for those former ministers now clearing out their offices and preparing for a move back to the backbenches. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, let's hear from our political editor, Brian Taylor, who's at Holyrood. That's the reshuffle complete. Brian, what do you make of it?
It's been a remarkable day here at Holyrood. Eager, smiling faces among the new ministers and those promoted, that mingling with the glum countenances of the dismissed. Nicola Sturgeon says that it's about refreshing the team to meet the continuing challenges that there are in Scotland. She also talks about the breadth the offer that the ministers are making, talks about the breadth of experience, both professional and life experience, particularly among the new ministers. But if it's broader, the new team is also just a bit bigger, and Jackson Carlo of the Conservatives draws attention to that. He notes that there are 26 ministers now out of a SNP parliamentary team of 62, and he says you have to wonder, or those who are not up for promotion, those who haven't made it to ministerial ranks, have to wonder just what they've done wrong. I think he meant it kindly.
Brian, thank you very much. One of the biggest casualties of the reshuffle was the Health Secretary, Shona Robson. She'd faced criticism over the missing of key waiting time targets and the handling of financial troubles at NHS Tayside. But solving the problems of the health service is not simple. We already spend more than 40% of the Scottish budget on health. So, as we approach the 70th anniversary of the NHS, does it require more than an injection of cash to survive? Our health correspondent Lisa Summers has been looking at the challenges.
The departure of the Health Secretary yesterday is an indication of how tough a job it is to fix the NHS. But on the front line, these are some of the staff working to fix you. They have thoughts on its future, but first some facts.
The NHS comes at a cost, over £13 billion. But let's break it down. For every man, woman and child, we spent just over £2,400 on our National Health Service. So is it worth it? Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I do, because we use HNS quite a lot. My husband's just out of the hospital. My son was in the hospital and the treatment we got was second to none. Can't fault it.
Well, your health is everything, isn't it? If you haven't got your health, you don't get anything. My daughter works for the NHS and they do a good job.
There are far too many people actually getting paid a lot of money for doing nothing. And the nurses and the doctors that are on are stretched well above, and they're doing a great job.
As demand for the NHS goes up, costs rise. As we get better at medicine, we all expect more. So what are the major challenges? Well, staffing costs are the biggest expense. £6.5 billion it cost us last year. And the workforce is getting older. Take just one example. 1 in 3 nurses is aged over 50. Imagine if they all left or retired when they could. And we're spending more and more on drug treatments, £1.68 billion in 2016-17. And in Scotland, we have unique health problems. Life expectancy here is still one of the lowest in Europe, at 77 for men and 81 for women. So clearly things can't go on as they are. So we asked some of those working on the front line of healthcare without extra cash, how would they like to see the NHS change?
I think we need to be talking to individual patients, discussing options and working out with them what treatment might really make a difference to them.
We will never have enough beds, we will never have enough doctors, and we will never have enough nurses. But what we can do is we can start using the new technologies that are available to us.
It's really important for the future of the NHS to have more nurses recruited, and particularly male nurses.
At present, we focus so much of our attention on how the health service works, measuring targets, time to treatment.
We need to be able to have an open and honest and frank national discussion about how we responsibly and sustainably use our NHS and what we want that to be for.
As a doctor, we are, given lots of information, evidence-based medicine, and sometimes we've got to step back, challenge that and say, well, is this treatment or surgical operation really going to make a difference for this patient?
In Aberdeen, we're sometimes seeing patients who've travelled from Orkney, from Shetland, and from 60, 70 miles away. Many of these appointments can be done using video conferencing facilities.
Starting off in primary schools and breaking that barrier that nursing is just for females.
So we need to be looking at positive measurement of patient outcomes rather than time to get to treatment.
That needs to be a joint discussion which is led by politicians across all political parties and healthcare professionals with the public.
What you've just seen is a snapshot of thoughts from the front line. But if we are to ensure that the NHS is fit and well for generations to come, then we all have a role to play in its future. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland.
2 people have been arrested after a crowd of up to 100 people surrounded a man's house in Armadale. 2 others were fined for a breach of the peace following last night's disturbance, which later saw a car set on fire. The 52-year-old man living in the property has been arrested in connection with indecent communications. The Scottish economy has grown slightly over the first 3 months of this year, according to the latest figures from the Scottish Government. On the whole, GDP in Scotland grew by 0.2%. That's compared with UK growth, which is up by just 0.1%. MSPs have agreed to exclude the former Minister Mark MacDonald from Holyrood for a month over sexual harassment. Mr MacDonald quit as early years minister in November last year after he sent an inappropriate message to a female worker and later left the SNP group. A probe by the Ethical Standards Watchdog found that his conduct constituted sexual harassment. The Aberdeen Donside MSP will be barred from the Parliament for a month without pay, starting after the summer recess. You're watching Reporting Scotland. It's 16 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. The hottest June day in over 20 years. Scotland is basking in a heat wave and it's set to get even hotter tomorrow. And still to come, Andy Murray takes on British #1 Kyle Edmund at Eastbourne, but still no decision on whether he'll play at Wimbledon. The first stretch of the long-awaited Aberdeen bypass has opened to the public. The 4-mile section north of the city welcomed its first vehicles in the early hours of this morning. The entire project is due to be completed by late autumn, with the Scottish Government claiming it will cut journey times and reduce congestion. Rachel Bell reports.
Hi Bill, this one's for Dice, please.
That one for Dice, is it?
Yes,
okay,
please.
I'll just put it on the van.
No bother. It's delivery time at this chemicals firm in Blackdog in Aberdeenshire. Bill Alexander's route takes him to Dice once or twice a day. The opening of the new road sees his journey time halved.
It'll be a lot quicker doing the deliveries, you know, going to Dice, etc. Getting from Dice into the town a lot quicker, rather than normally it takes about 20 minutes to half an hour to get to Dice from the Blackdog. It seems to be a godsend, really.
It's part of Aberdeen's long-awaited bypass project, costing around £745 million. Drivers in the northeast have been watching this road take shape for more than 3 years, and the opening of this first stretch is just the beginning. Once it's completed, the route will be more than 45 kilometres long, and there's still work to do. The bypass had been due to open earlier this year. Bad weather and the collapse of the contractor Carillion has led to delays and frustration for drivers and businesses. Some stretches are more nearing completion than others. It's expected more sections will open over the summer, with the entire project due to be completed in late autumn, something Bill is very much looking forward to.
It'll make a big difference. Going to be so much traffic jams in the morning, people got to work, and you know, things like that. So it'll be a lot better.
Rachel Bell, Reporting Scotland, Aberdeenshire.
The projected cost of decommissioning equipment in the offshore industry has fallen by almost £2 billion, according to the Oil and Gas Authority. The OGA said last year that decommissioning would cost just under £60 billion, with the liability being split between the UK government and operators. A drive has been ongoing to find ways of making the process cheaper. Andy Murray is expected to announce later whether he'll play at Wimbledon next week. The two-time champion wanted to see how his body felt after successive matches in a short space of time. He's being put to the test by the current British #1 Kyle Edmund, as Alistair Lamont reports.
Stay here for a picture, Andy. Please. The old master meets the young pretender. A final chance for Andy Murray to prove to himself he can cope with the rigours of competitive tennis after a year out injured. Kyle Edmund has assumed the role of Britain's top player in Andy Murray's absence and quickly showed why, breaking the Scots serve in the opening game. The world number 18 was always going to be a tougher prospect than Stan Wawrinka in the first round. But Murray's tenacity kept him in the first set after the early setback. Edmund has learned much from Murray over the years and closed out the first set in composed fashion.
Edmund hits him for 6.
The former world #1 serve continued to come under pressure in the second set, and eventually that pressure told, giving Edmund the edge.
Well,
The outcome of this match is not quite immaterial, but for Murray it's very much secondary to how his body reacts to a second match in 3 days. That will determine whether he plays at Wimbledon next week. Alistair Lamont reporting Scotland.
The coach behind Britain's medal-winning relay teams is to return to Scottish Athletics as Director of Performance and Coaching. The Northern Irishman won Coach of the Year at last year's BBC Sports Personality of the Year Awards. That was after his squads won 4 World Championship medals. He was previously at Scottish Athletics from 2012 to 2014. Now, let's go back to our coverage of the 70th anniversary of the NHS. It was the world's first cradle-to-grave health service, but many of its principles were forged in Scotland more than 3 decades earlier, an attempt to deal with poverty and deprivation in the Highlands and Islands. Our social affairs correspondent, Rival Alderson, looks back at the birth of a national institution.
A great moment when the National Health Service came into being. For the first time, medical services from a GP consultation to hospital treatment were all free.
This leaflet is coming through your letterbox one day soon.
It would transform healthcare in the UK, but for the people of the Highlands and Islands, many of its innovations were already in place. In 1912, an inquiry recommended a public medical service in the north where poverty was endemic and basic healthcare was often absent.
To begin with, there is no foundation for the children. The milk of their cows is given to the calves, and there is no milk for the children.
The inquiry report was hard-hitting.
It completely destroyed the idyllic myth of the Highlands as being thatched cottages with peat smoke rising, chickens in the yard, hayricks. It showed the Highlands and Islands for what they really were: poor living conditions, poor housing, diet, a complete lack of doctors on the ground.
The Highlands and Islands Medical Service, introduced in 1913, paid GPs a salary so people could afford to call them. Doctors were given cars to cover the remote areas, and in the early 20s, nurses like Flora Ferguson were provided with motorbikes. The Highland experience was viewed in another report into Scotland's health in the 1930s as a model for the whole of the country. It later became the blueprint for the NHS.
They said, well, we could use some of that for Scotland as a whole. And so the idea of a salaried GP service, integrating services, so things like school health, child welfare, maternal health. It was probably the most detailed investigation into health in Britain at the time.
In Edinburgh, former health service staff meet each week to relive their experiences, some dating back to the very start of the NHS 70 years ago. 90-year-old Marion Dunlop remembers the brainchild of Health Secretary Anoirin Bevan as controversial.
I know the doctors were upset. I think they were worried they wouldn't always have their own way of doing things. They got zinc and castor oil cream and painted it on the embankment. Boot out Bevan.
Josie Haxton remembers her mother being worried about calling out the doctor before she joined the NHS in 1949.
When I think about it, my mother used to worry about bills if she had to phone the doctor. I started in a TB sanatorium, answering an advert in the paper for untrained staff. Didn't think I'd be taken at 16, but anyway, I was.
Norma MacArthur was also one of the first NHS nurses. The training and living in nurses' homes was tough.
Very strict. It was almost like an army training. Well, we had to be in by 10 o'clock and you had to get a late pass if you wanted to go out anywhere. You know, they really kept an eye on us.
The NHS has been providing comprehensive care for 70 years, and although dramatically different today, it's still doing so. Its model of a GP-centred service forged in the north of Scotland 35 years earlier. Rival Alderson reporting Scotland.
Now, time for more on the weather. And Christopher's making the most of the sunshine. He's escaped the studio and joins us from the wonderful Kelpies on the Forth and Clyde Canal in Falkirk. Sparkling there, Chris.
It is indeed, Sally. Yes, good evening. Welcome to the Helix, home of the Kelpies here in Falkirk on a beautiful summer's day. Look at them towering 30 metres into the sky, looking even more resplendent under these blue skies. And it's been hot and sunny across the country. As we heard in Aileen Clark's report earlier in the programme, 31 Celsius at Aviemore was our top spot, the warmest June day since the mid-90s. And a few other locations getting close to that as well. Inland areas well into the high 20s. And if you like the heat, good news, there's more on the way. If you don't, I'm afraid there's more on the way. Now, we have had some low cloud around eastern coast today, and that's with us again through the course of this evening and overnight. But elsewhere, it's dry and clear with light and variable winds. Quite a warm night, temperatures around 9 to 15 Celsius, so uncomfortable at times, especially with the heat trapped indoors. Tomorrow, and it's a day very similar to today. We will have that low cloud, mist and har affecting some eastern coastal parts, but it should disperse quicker than it did today, and elsewhere it's dry, sunny and warm, and if anything, probably hotter than today. So let's take a look at some of the temperatures by mid-afternoon at 4 o'clock. Well, across Orkney and Shetland, mid to high teens, perhaps a little bit of low cloud affecting the coastline in Shetland, but some sunshine as well. Through most of the mainland, temperatures in the mid to high 20s, just a small chance of 1 or 2 showers sparked off by the heat through the Cairngorms and across the southern uplands. And we could well see 31 Celsius tomorrow again, perhaps even a little more. Glasgow is probably the favoured spot to see that high temperature. And the rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, it's staying dry. We start to pick up a bit of a northeasterly breeze. That'll feed in a little more cloud, but it's another uncomfortable night for sleeping Thursday night into Friday, with temperatures at times holding into the teens. So for Friday itself, well, it's another dry and warm day for many. A little bit cooler for eastern Scotland with that northeasterly breeze, a little more cloud here. But across western Scotland, there'll be some sunshine once again, with temperatures perhaps 25 or 26 Celsius. So another warm, sunny summer's day. What about the weekend? We've been stuck at work all week. Is it going to last? Well, actually, Saturday doesn't look too bad. There'll be a little more cloud around in the far north, perhaps some showery rain, but for many of us, a dry, sunny day. Temperatures down a notch. Sunday, probably a bit cloudier, but mostly dry. So for the next few days, it's dry, sunny and hot for some, and it's a hot evening from a beautiful evening here at the Kelpies. It's back to you, Sally, in the studio.
Christopher, thank you very much. You'll have to come back for the late forecast, though. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. The Army has been called in to help battle a huge moorlands fire which has been raging for 3 days in the north of England. The blaze covers miles of moorland near Manchester and prompted the evacuation of up to 100 homes. And Scotland is basking in its warmest June day in more than 2 decades, and it's set to get even hotter, as you just heard. The highest temperature was recorded in Aviemore, with the mercury at 31 degrees Celsius. And that's all from Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, though, from everyone on the team here and around the country, that's it. Have a very good evening.